To those of you who are protesting and want to make sure that no one else is making money protesting, the idea that you have come up with is a great idea. Are you gonna sacrifice every big day to strike and protest? And the people who aren't striking are calling the people who are striking dumb. Trump's coming to my town the same day as Valentine's. Everyone's lives are different. Everyone has different financial situations. But if you're claiming that you are gonna protest unless you see a profitable ride, teaching the driver community to be able to never have to drive for Uber and Lyft when they hate driving for Uber and Lyft. So here's my answer on whether or not I will protest this week on Valentine's Day. Drivers are protesting on V-Day. We're gonna read an article that kind of sums up the driver's sentiment. And then we're gonna talk about how rideshare protesters want to hurt drivers who aren't protesting. They have a plan to financially hurt drivers that plan on working on Valentine's Day. And I'm gonna share that with you. And then we're also gonna talk about whether you should or shouldn't protest, and if I'm going to protest. Let's start here with this article written by Business Insider. If you want to show your appreciation for me being on top of important news and getting it to you in a way that matters as quickly as matters, please hit the thumbs up on this video and please consider subscribing. Thank you. Uber and Lyft drivers are staging a nationwide protest on Valentine's Day. You might have a hard time finding a ride home from your Valentine's dinner. That's because some Uber and Lyft drivers across the country are planning to not drive on Wednesday to protest the declining pay they say they've experienced, in addition to concerns related to driver safety and deactivations. Organizers told Business Insider that drivers in roughly 20 cities, including San Francisco, Dallas, Chicago, Boston, Phoenix, Atlanta, Toronto, and Vancouver, British Columbia, plan to participate in the protest set to consist of not working for the entirety of Wednesday. There has never been a global gig protest where drivers were unified around one cause, Torsten, which is the rideshare professor, said. A ride-hailing YouTuber who has helped organize the protest told Business Insider. I don't believe there's never been a global protest. I'm pretty sure there's been a lot, but it's okay, doesn't matter. There have been many isolated protests by drivers in various cities over the last 2 years. This one is unique. Drivers gravitated toward Valentine's Day because there's typically high rider demand on the holiday. Organizers said it's difficult to estimate how many drivers would ultimately take part in the action. In Los Angeles, the driver advocacy group Rideshare Drivers United, which has over 20,000 members across California, is organizing a gathering outside Uber's Greenlight Hub. Last Friday, the group conducted a 2-hour phone bank to spread the word about the Valentine's Day protest. I will say, whether you disagree or agree with this protest, they are doing work, and I do appreciate their work. We just see a lot of fares that are going way below what it costs us to drive, Nicole Moore, a part-time Lyft driver and the president of Rideshare Drivers United, told Business Insider. There have been bubbling up actions all over the country. Dissatisfaction among ride-hailing drivers has been on the rise over the past year. There have been isolated protests in US cities, including San Diego, Atlanta, and a bunch of other cities that I'm not going to go and list. Protesters have used different tactics, including gathering around major airports during busy travel periods and choosing the day of a Taylor Swift concert to make their absence. Most protests have centered on drivers' complaints of declining pay. In recent months, several Uber and Lyft drivers have told Business Insider that ride-hailing has become less profitable than it used to be. This is true, especially if you started during the pandemic, but the pandemic was a fluke in time. Right before the pandemic started, I've had other viewers tell me that what we're experiencing now is reminiscent of what rideshare was before the pandemic started. Many have blamed the rollout of upfront fare programs and higher driver supply for the reduced pay. They've also called for greater transparency about how their pay is calculated. I do suspect that Lyft made a switch on how upfront they are with pay because of this. I think they knew this process was coming, and I think in order to get ahead of the backlash that they did what they did. It's PR, and it's effective PR, but it still sucks. You know, they're fighting a war and they're trying to make it seem like they're not, and they're being a little effective at it. The last 4 weekends, I made $21.50 per online hour before expenses in Los Angeles. Sergio said this, right? That's from the Rideshare Guy YouTube channel, part-time Uber driver who's a senior contributor to the Gig Driver Advocacy blog and YouTube channel, The Rideshare Guy. Sergio, I'm gonna beg you right now. I'm begging you. I'm talking to you. Please stop talking in online hours. Please don't make this the thing. Like, the reason why there's been such a shift to online hours, I understand it's because of that New York law and how laws are calculating pay. We do not need to be talking. Oh, wait, hold on. Per online hour. Okay, no, I'm tripping. I thought he said per book time. I'm tripping. I'm so in my head about that book time nonsense that I thought that's what he said. Okay, no, he's doing online time. which is the correct thing to do and calculating how much he made. So but we can still use this for example, right? So he's saying he made $21.50 per online hour. If he used active hours, this number would probably be in the 30s or closer to the 40s. But we know like that's not what we want to do because it's not accurate. The $21.50 per online hour is the accurate metric that we need to go by when we're having these conversations about driver pay, right? If we use active time as the method of conversations about driver pay, then Uber and Lyft win. So more information is always better. Not saying it should be one or the other, but online time, I think, is the metric we want to use for these types of conversations. I'm sorry for going off on you, Sergio, for something you didn't say. My brain is just so fried over it. So I apologize to you guys watching as well. Taking out my $6 per hour expenses, I might as well go flip burgers. I can make $20 an hour without risk. That's what Sergio says. In an email to BI, Lyft wrote that it was working to improve the driver experience and pointed out to new offers and commitments released in February, including a minimum earnings guarantee and an improved deactivation appeals process that aimed to increase driver pay and transparency. Increasing the pay and transparency, that's a win for drivers. That's whether we dislike the information that comes with that transparency, that's a different topic. But just having that transparency is a step in the right direction. We need to keep on stepping. The only reason there is an improved deactivation appeals process is because New York made it so. You do not get credit for this. Thank you, New York. In February, Lyft said the typical US driver earned roughly $23 per engaged hour after expenses. See, Lyft is trying to use that engaged hour number. The company also announced it would. So, all right, before I even move on from that, like I really want to double down. You guys must be so annoyed about this, but engaged hour. If you are working 10 hours, you're only engaged for 2 hours. You make $23 in those 2 hours. That's a shitty day. That is not a good day to be a rideshare driver. And they can hide behind the fact that active hours are not a great metric. I just don't see it as a great metric. The company also announced it would begin guaranteeing drivers 70% of their weekly rider payments after external fees. In November, Uber said the typical US driver earned about $33 per engaged hour, not accounting for driving expenses. Is this really the metric you guys want to use? Engaged hours? It's not an effective metric. Because like I'm pretty sure most of the people who say, yeah, let me use engaged hours who are reading this, still think Uber's full of shit, right? I assume that's the case. I mean, a more accurate like number will be online time. All right, let me stop being a dead horse. Back to the article. It says calculating a driver's true earnings can be quite complicated. Engaged hours are the time between when a ride is accepted and completed and don't include the time drivers spend relocating to a higher demand area or filling up their gas tanks. Drivers also have to account for expenses such as gas, maintenance, and vehicle depreciation, and estimate how much of these were tied to ride hailing rather than their personal vehicle use. Moore said that Valentine's Day protests could be the largest coordinated action since 2019, when protests took place in several cities in response to similar concerns regarding pay. 2019 is when the pandemic started. So once the pandemic started and drivers either decided just not to drive first, they didn't want to get sick, or the drivers that did drive and made a crap ton of money, now they're protesting again, similarly to how they were protesting in 2019. So like I said earlier in this video, this is reminiscent of the rideshare space before the pandemic. If you are a pandemic rideshare baby, just like me, that was a great time in history for rideshare drivers. It's a bad time for, you get what I'm saying. If you wanted to make money, you took advantage of that time period. That was an anomaly. It wasn't the normal trend of rideshare. The normal trend of rideshare is decreased pay year over year. Something you got to think about when you're planning out your future, right? It can take up to 2-3 years to pivot to a better paying job between learning the thing and then doing the thing. And we need to have an exit plan now. While Avedian supports the Valentine's Day protest, he's skeptical that it will have much of an impact. Relative to customer demand, he said the ride-hailing drivers market is the most oversupplied it's been in the 8 years that he's been a driver, which is true. Both Uber and Lyft have said this on their conference calls, their quarterly calls, that, the amount of drivers they have on the platform is up, which is great for them, not great for us. That means plenty of drivers who aren't participating in the protest could be available to pick up riders. In November, Uber announced it had a record 6.5 million active drivers and couriers. 6.5 million worldwide. Avedian said pushing for new legislation was the best way for drivers to seek changes. I agree. New York, Seattle, and California have enacted minimum pay rates for drivers and proposals are under consideration in Minneapolis, Chicago, and Massachusetts. Let's take a quick side note here and let's look at how that's going. What do drivers have to say in, what was that state? Seattle, with new min gig pay. The title of this Reddit post is "No, the minimum wage for gig workers is not backfiring, quote unquote. The corporations are retaliating." So let's go and read this article that he linked here. It says billion-dollar corporations such as DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub, and Instacart started ramping up their cry bully tactics against gig workers after the city of Seattle instituted new pay up branded protections on January 13th of this year. Workers don't want you or the brand new business-backed city council to fall for it. They'll cry, they'll throw themselves on the ground, kicking and screaming like a toddler. Anything to make reasonable labor policy fail, said driver and pay-up advocate Carmen Figueroa. Most recently, King 5 posted an article under the headline, "It's definitely backfiring. Seattle ordinance intended to help app delivery workers is hurting them." In the story, King 5 found 2 workers who described slower business and thus lower wages in the 20 days between the laws taking effect and the story's publication date. Lauser said it's too early to know for sure how the new law will change the volume of orders and their paychecks long term. As gig workers have told policymakers countless times, it's super unpredictable job. So far, different workers have had different experiences. For example, Wei Lin, a driver at GoPuff, used to make about $8 or $9 an hour, and now he can usually make $16 an hour. He said the raise is not enough for him to ever buy a house or become as wealthy as the CEO he works for, but now Lin is slightly less concerned about getting priced out next time his landlord hikes up his rent. So what I'm seeing here is people who weren't doing very well, like, I don't have a better term for this, but bottom of the barrel earners seem to be benefiting from this, but it's very possible that people at the top are going to see a decreased pay across the spread. That's reasonable supply and demand expectation. Just because government gets involved doesn't make it better, right? It might look better on paper, but the actual effects of making changes still have to be realized. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't change because of that. I am saying is that things don't often happen the way we think it will, for starters, when it comes with the government. And then 2, it takes a long time. Are you trying to wait 2 years for a change to happen with rideshare? I want you out of rideshare before then. Article continues saying, what matters is that they'll bring attention and that this is happening. This is important too. I do think even if the strikes and protests don't have an immediate cause and effect, it is bringing up attention. It is drumming up attention. News stories are picking this up. People are learning about what's going on. So it is working, right? It is generating views. The article says, and I don't think that it's a one and done. I think it's going to happen a lot in 2024. It will happen a lot in 2024. And so here's what I kind of want to like ask you guys who are watching. Are you going to sacrifice every big day to strike and protest? You let me know in the comments below. But January was rough for a lot of people. December was rough. November was rough. And Valentine's Day is probably going to be the biggest day. And maybe not just Valentine's Day. Maybe it'll spread off into the weekend as well. But this week will be the biggest week since New Year's. Are you willing to sacrifice every big week, every big day to protest or strike? I'm not saying you should or shouldn't. I'm just trying to get you guys to tell me in the comments what you guys would do. I think the article did a good job of overall driver sentiment on Valentine's Day strike. The next thing on the topic list is how rideshare protesters want to hurt non-protesting drivers. If you're not aware of this, I want to say it's intuitive. I want to say to those of you who are protesting and want to make sure that no one else is making money protesting, the idea that you have come up with is a great idea. It's a great idea for your goals, but it is not a great idea for the goals of people who need to make money. I don't want to say it's selfish. I'll just tell you what it is, right? So their plan, some of these people, they claim they're going to all day Wednesday, Valentine's Day, they're going to go online in their app and they're never going to take a ride. The reason why they have decided to go online in their app instead of just leaving the app off, someone made a great point. It's like when you're protesting, you have to show up at the picket line, right? You got to be there to protest. So by keeping their apps on, they're hoping to confuse the Uber and Lyft algorithm into thinking that there are enough driver demand. Therefore, we do not need to put surges on the map. It's a really good idea. I don't know how well it will work in practice. I do know they're going to be declining a lot of rides. I don't know what that means for their accounts. I don't know if Lyft is going to retaliate in some way, shape, or form. I don't even know if they can. But I do want you to be aware that this is a plan that people have, and they're going to put it in effect. Now, consider the idea that most Anytime I've taken a Lyft and I talk to these drivers, they don't even have an online presence. They don't even know what's going on in rideshare YouTube. They don't even know about protests and things like that, which is fine. But the motivation behind the drivers turning their apps on, leaving it on to make sure that other drivers who are actually working don't get the surge benefit from it, that stems from this conversation that I've seen kind of unfold where, all right, let's strike. And the people who aren't striking are calling the people who are striking dumb, even though that the people who aren't striking would benefit from the people who are striking. And so the people who are striking was like, okay, we're here, doing things on your behalf, not on your behalf, but things that benefit you as well. But you're giving us crap for it. Okay, so then we can hurt you too. It's kind of how I watched it unfold. I don't agree with the overall sentiment, but I can understand it. To those of you who are striking, do your thing. To those of you who aren't striking, do your thing. Don't feel bad. Don't make these people feel bad for you, like make you feel bad for working. Don't make these people make you feel bad for striking. And in the same breath, just let them do them. There's no reason to hate on someone who's striking. And there's also no reason to hate on someone who's not striking. And I feel like the anger from people who are striking towards people who aren't striking is bigger. Everyone's lives are different. Everyone has different financial situations. Rarely anyone at 8, 10 years old, whatever age, was like, I want to be a full-time rideshare driver till the day I die. We fell into this profession. Most of us fell into this profession. We wanted to transition to a different job. We got fired. This wasn't our first choice. And most drivers who are driving still aren't in a place financially where they can afford not to drive, right? And that's kind of why the protests exist. But they can't wait 6 months, a year, 2 years for the government to come and do something for them to go and make more money. So if you do not want to protest or to strike, I support that. If you want to protest or strike, go ahead. I support that. I acknowledge that the people who aren't striking will still benefit from those who are in the long term. I don't think there needs to be a division. I don't think it needs to be black and white. Everyone has different things that they are worried about. In fact, if you're following my channel, I think that you shouldn't strike if you don't meet some of these qualifications I'm about to talk about. If you don't have an emergency fund for your household of at least $1,000 and for your business of at least $1,000. So an overall $2,000 starter emergency fund. This isn't the emergency fund I expect you to have forever. This is where, one, your 4 walls have to be covered. Your rent, your electricity, your mortgage, your 4 walls need to be covered. If you're fine on your 4 walls, great. Not behind on your bills, great. Then the next thing you do is you get that emergency fund together. $1,000 for your home. Something might happen to your family. Most expenses don't go over $1,000 at one time. And then $1,000 for your car. Now, let me talk about emergency expenses for a second. If you know you need new tires, that is not an emergency. You should be checking your tires routinely and saving up money over time. You don't touch your emergency for that. An emergency would be your check engine light comes on, and to make sure that your car isn't falling apart immediately, you take it in. Use that emergency fund to pay for the diagnostic service. You figure out what the service is required, and then you reevaluate, can you continue driving and save up for that money? The emergency fund needs to be an emergency fund, a last minute crutch. You can't use it sparingly. So I want to say that about the emergency fund. If you do not have an emergency fund, I think you should spend Valentine's Day driving as much as you can, work the whole 18 hours if possible, and saving an emergency fund. The second thing, if you do not have a rideshare endorsement on your insurance and your claim is that you can't afford it, then you can't afford to strike. Be honest with you. All of us should have the endorsement, because if you get into an accident with Uber and Lyft, the deductible is $2,500. The rideshare endorsement will cover that gap. Unless you want to self-insure, unless you want to kick your emergency fund up to $2,500 and then you don't want the rideshare endorsement, cool, do you. That's not my advice. So no emergency fund, don't strike. If you're not self-insured enough to cover the deductible if you get into an accident, or if you don't have the rideshare, this is not commercial insurance. It's called the rideshare. What is it? There's a specific word here. But if you call them up, you say, hey, I want to have rideshare covered on it too. It's not the same as commercial insurance. It's like $100, $150 on top of whatever you're paying now. If you don't have those things, you shouldn't be striking. For me, I'm trying to pay off a lot of debt. I have about 100K that I'm trying to pay off this year. And my financial goals, I'm sorry to say this is selfish, but my financial goals are more important than the needs and qualms of the entire rideshare community. What I have going on in my household, what I have to build to protect my family. To me, the best strike protest I can give Uber and Lyft is to put myself in a financial position to never need to turn the app on ever again. And that's what I want for my community. That's what I want for you guys. And not everyone wants that. That's fine. But we are literally working for companies that have said in PR statements that they want to someday replace us with self-driving cars. You can disagree about if they'll ever realize that dream, but it doesn't change the sentiment that they have said that they want to get rid of us. I don't think rideshare is a great long-term thing. I think that it's a great stepping stone into something else, but it takes time, it takes planning, it takes like some financial healing in order to get to that level. And that's what I want for you guys. So if you are doing decent financially speaking, you have no debt, your bills are all caught up, you have, I would say, a 3-month emergency fund at minimum of your expenses, your minimum expenses. You want to go and protest and whatever, go ahead. That's when I would protest. Before then, so here's my answer on whether or not I will protest this week on Valentine's Day. The answer is no. I'm sorry. And it's not because I don't think it's valuable. It is valuable. But the financial things that I'm trying to achieve it's the reason why I'm doing Uber and Lyft. I'm doing it because I have financial goals I'm trying to achieve. And I think that I can't afford, I'm already behind from where I would like to be this year. And I can't afford to continue falling more behind. And then on top of that, Trump's coming to my town the same day as Valentine's. I know that that's going to cause a huge surge in demand. We have a art festival thing happening here called Seaweed, and that's going to cause more demand. And I'm not financially secure enough to where I can afford missing work in those days. I'm sorry if I disappoint you, but I'll be honest, be truthful, be straightforward. I'm always going to tell it how it is. I'll try to deliver the information as best as I can. That's where I'm at. Normal in America is broke. So just because majority of the people might be doing something doesn't mean it's right. That's all I want to say on that. Go Gigi says, I'm protesting on February 14th, 2024, and that's not teaching subscribers and viewers how to save money to take a day off is doing an injustice to our driver community. No, man, I don't see, it's not black and white for starters. Just because I'm not teaching people how to save up money to take a day off doesn't mean I'm doing an injustice. I'm trying to teach people to work every day so that they never have to work Uber and Lyft ever again in the future so they can realize their dreams. To me, that's more important to my community, to the entire, teaching the driver community to be able to never have to drive for Uber and Lyft when they hate driving for Uber and Lyft and they do it because they have to do it and not necessarily because they want to do it. Any message that is counter to that, to me, is an a disservice to the entire driver community. However, I don't believe life is so black and white and that the way I think is the way everyone should think. Whether someone saved up $10,000 to take the busiest day of the year off, I'm still going to go and tell them to go and work that day if they have debt. You know, so like I just said, I just gave you guys a requirement. If you have debt, you shouldn't be striking. Go get it. If you have debt, I'm going to tell you, you shouldn't be striking. If you don't have your emergency fund together, you shouldn't be striking. You should be racing to these things because it just takes one accident. It just takes one thing, one engine explosion for you to put yourself in a position that is going to be so difficult from recovering from. And so any opportunity you can to make the most money possible, I am forever and always going to tell people to go ahead and do that. So I disagree with you and you obviously disagree with me. And I accept that my opinion isn't the only opinion that matters. So, but I'm going to record my phone screen on Valentine's Day and we're going to see, you know, what it looks like out there. We're going to see the reality of what happens. I suspect it won't have much of a dent in terms of affecting drivers who are driving, but it will have a huge dent in the media coverage. GoGig says, Tristan, Sergio, and Chris did say leave the app on, don't take requests. So I'm not gonna lie, man. From a neutral perspective, it's such a good tactic. It's such a good tactic. But as someone who wants people to go out there and make their money, it sucks. This is a protest only accept profitable rides. I have more respect from people who are actually protesting and striking, like 100%. And more respect for people who have decided that they don't want to protest and are just going to go in and drive 100%. But if you're claiming that you are going to protest unless you see a profitable ride, isn't that what you do every day? You know, aren't you just always, especially for you cherry pickers, isn't the goal to always take profitable rides? Isn't that just like a normal day for you? And I think that if you apply that logic to the day you're supposed to strike on Valentine's Day, I think pretty much every ride is going to be profitable and you're just going to end up not striking. So you let me know. Am I missing something there? Oh my God, this wire is killing me.